So welcome back. Here's another video in my series about dealing with the federal case. We previously talked about cycle evaluation report and what happens when you're getting close to your trial date and the beginning conversations about plea deals. So I know this by this point you're probably feeling very nervous if you're personally involved in a federal case. So I want to go over a couple of things just as a refresher on the things you should know at this point in time. You have already gone over evidence with your lawyers. There has been motions and hearings to go over what has been presented to you. It is your right as a defendant to request that the prosecution hands over anything that may be used in their prosecution of the case. Just so you know, like I've said before, it takes time for that to happen, and of course, it also takes time for your lawyer to review the materials that may be handed to them. And you know, if there is a decision to go to a trial, I'm not personally as experienced in this because in my own personal situation, we did not decide to go to trial. But in terms of if you are going the route to go to trial, you're going to keep going on the discovery piece for your case to figure out what kind of holes you can poke in their case. Are they omitting something that would be considered what would be called exculpatory? That would actually, cause your case so that you are not guilty of whatever they're charging with. So, if you're going the route of going to trial, you're probably this video may not be as helpful for you. But if you are considering not going to trial and instead deciding if you want to consider a plea deal, then this is where we're going to focus on kind of the specifics of how plea deals are written. Okay, I've talked to you before that plea arrangements they tend to happen very close to trial, the actual trial date that you set. Not necessarily because that's just the like they want to wait until the very end, but it's really the duels between the your defense attorney and the prosecutor in deciding, do we really want to go to trial on either side. For the prosecutor, even if they have a strong case, they don't always have a desire to go to trial. Like I've said in the previous video, it's very expensive to go to trials, to prep witnesses, to get scheduling dates, impaneling a jury. It's a huge amount of effort to get to that point. So it really helps the prosecutor to negotiate deals in which you skip all of that, right? So in the federal kind of setup, when you're negotiating with the prosecutor, right? This is usually not you. This is your lawyer who's gonna do it. They're gonna have different ways of deciding how to get a deal that's good for you as a defendant, right? And in most cases, what you want is you want to plead down to a lesser charge than what you currently have. So say for example you have a drug conspiracy case, right? Like where they're listing you as in a group of people who have created this drug conspiracy. You're also been charged with possession, distribution, probably throwing in also some firearm charges. What you want is a deal where they can drop some of those other charges, where you're maybe just one felony charge, or that if it was drug conspiracy, they can drop it to a lower level felony for that one. By doing that, that's how you really are able to get something where you were facing maybe 50 plus years, if it was all consecutive, charges, and you got that penalty to potentially doing something like 10 or 15 years. It's not a magic how it happens. It's really literally people just haggling back and forth to try and figure out what's best for my client. So in some cases, what they're willing to do is drop certain charges and keep the ones that they think, the prosecutor thinks, will give you the certain amount of time that their bosses will be happy with. And then there are other charges if you have a very serious charge, like a high level felony, and they're able to break it down, so if you were in a distribution case and you were trying to get down to a possession, that can make a huge difference on the mandatory minimums and the potential amount of time you would have to serve. Now, in general, the strategy of breaking down the charges, substituting charges, is almost always going to be better than the outcome you would get at a trial if you were to be found guilty. So that is the reason why people are doing that. Now, when you actually are gonna, once you agree on, how you're gonna break down charges to a lower charge, or have them convince the prosecutor to drop certain charges, you're gonna have to figure out what is the total number of years you intend to serve if you were to plead to all of the charges in front of a judge. And that part will be very confusing for most people who've never done this. You're trying to figure out, well, I got it down to 2 charges, and I originally had 5. What does it mean in terms of the actual time? So there are 2 ways to come up with pleas, and there's one is called a C plea, as in literally the letter C, and the other one is a B plea. Okay. So with a C plea, what happens is that they take the totality of all your charges, that you have left for based on your plea bargain. The prosecutor will say, well, we would like to, if you do this, that we would do a range from a low number to a high number. So they would say, let's do 3 years at the lowest to 8 years at the highest, right? Your lawyer obviously in the negotiation process will want to say, well, how about not even say 3? How about 2? And so a lot of the pushback is going to be the prosecutor wants that low number to be fairly closer to the high number, so there isn't a huge range. But at the same time, your lawyer may also say, in that example, 3 to 8, they may want to say, well, I think if that's the case, then let's just have a range of 3 to 5 years. So the worst that you can do is get sentenced to 5 years by a judge. So where this range matters is that the 2 parties decide what is the maximum and the minimum that you as a defendant will get, but ultimately it's the judge who will pick the final number in that range to serve as the sentence that he's going to give you based on your plea bargain arrangements, right? So if you did not like that, because there's a huge difference between serving 3 years and serving 8 years, then you may try something different, which is called a B plea. A B plea is it's essentially the opposite of the range, where you have 2 different numbers. You have one number, and you're supposed to pick one number which both sides have to agree on. Say, for that same example where you're pleading down, you have several charges, you're trying to figure out, but you were previously looking at between 3 to 8. You may say, okay, let's agree to 5. That's right down the middle. It's right down the middle. It would be something that the prosecutors may say, okay, that's fine for us, because that's typically what people get, in your situation, if you were being bumped down from conspiracy to just possession or distribution. As a defendant, you really have to think then, if you're getting 5 as the agreed upon number in a B plea, you can't back out of that number. You're going to have to say, okay, I will accept that I will have to do 5 years. There's no possibility of doing less than 5 in a B plea because there's no range, right? So if you're a gambling man or woman, you would really have to consider whether or not you want to take a risk on a C plea in which there is a range and a judge will pick whether based on your situation, based on who you are, based on the information the judge has in their hand, whether they want to give you on the heavier side or the lighter side of the range. On a B plea, yes, you're giving them just one number for them to pick. There is a danger though. With the B plea, a judge can outright say, no, I don't like this number at all, and I'm going to reject this. And they can substitute with their own number. So if you previously got the deal of, say, 5 years that was agreed upon by your lawyer and the prosecutor, then the judge will say, I don't like this. It's too light. I think that it's too light for his co-defendants. They're getting around 10. I think I would be giving this person at least 2 more years, right? So bumping up to maybe 7. In that situation, it's left up to the judge to decide what the actual number could be, that single number. So it's a risk that you can take. Or that a judge can just flat out reject the deal and say, I don't like the number that you guys came up with. You're going to have to go back and renegotiate or prepare for trial if you can't get a number, that you can agree upon. So I haven't heard too many examples of a B plea, but I do know a lot of people take C pleas because C pleas tend to be for folks who are already staring at a lot of time, and so they've gotten this agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office so that they can somehow get a bottom number that was hopefully nowhere near the mandatory minimum, because the mandatory minimum it's usually is 15, 20, 25, 30 years. Depending on the offenses and how many charges you have. And so if you can get yourself under, say, 15 years for a mandatory minimum, so a number that's where the range is as far away from 15, like say you can get a deal for between 6 to 10 years, right? When the mandatory minimum says it's 15 years. That's a probably very good deal. However, you probably be cautious that a judge who knows that 15 years is the normal period that we will get will probably end up giving you 10 years if they really want to throw the book at you. So it's important to negotiate on that piece. I will say, having personally gone through a C plea, it is really the most emotionally wrecking thing, because a lot of the times the numbers between the low end and the high end are so big. It could be like a difference of 10 to 20 years, right? There's a huge difference. Already 10 years is a lot of your time. But imagine you can get 15 years, right? You don't get the maximum of 15 years on top. So 5 on top of 10 is still a lot of time. So I don't think that's anything over 10 years as a low end is probably not a good example. But say you were looking for any time between 6 to 11 years, that's a huge range of about 5 years, 6 to 11. You can be there for about half a decade or more than a decade. And time is important, and you want to make sure that you get the best deals. So you want to do everything in your power so that things steer towards you being able to get the lower end, or at least not the maximum of the range. So that's kind of my beginning talk about the plea deal, plea arrangement setup. And how deals are just kind of crafted. I'll talk more about the next step in my future video about the plea hearing. So this is where you're actually not confronting the judge, but you'll be meeting with the judge to actually go over the deal that you've been able to strike up with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And, at that point, you'll start to get a feel for how these pleas are actually supposed to make life easier for everybody. So if you like what I've posted, definitely hit the like button on my video. If you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe, because there's going to be more coming for this series on dealing with the federal case. And then also hit the notifications button so you know when I post new videos. Please check out my other videos if you haven't had a chance. I'm doing a whole bunch of different series just so I can get as much content out there for you guys in preparation for me personally going to prison. So this video we're talking today is about my experience of going through the system. So I hope you're at least getting some picture of what it feels like, if you were to be involved, which I definitely hope very few of you will ever have to step in a federal courtroom to deal with. So I'll talk to you guys soon in a future video. Goodbye.